Let's listen to this.
As I've been saying for years, one of the things that I'm most furious at Netanyahu for was his strategy of propping up Hamas for years, specifically with the goal of thwarting a Palestinian state. And so, to sit here and then turn around and talk about how evil Hamas is and use them as the justification for why you are somehow allowed to just destroy a captive people that don't have a military of their own to defend themselves. It's just, look, I'll just say this. There was one poll recently that had, they said right before October 7th, in America, do you sympathize with Israel or Palestine, was plus 48 for Israel. And then the latest poll, it was +1 for the Palestinians. You would be hard pressed to find a 50-point collapse in any issue. Like, just imagine, Piers, if we woke up tomorrow and 90% of America was pro-life. We'd be like, what happened here? I mean, and the reason why this shift is happening is very simply because what Israel's doing to the Palestinians is so indefensible. The relationship between Israel and the United States of America is too bizarre, and it does not make sense in America's interest. And number three, this type of propaganda just doesn't work on people. You can't sit here and say you're the most moral army in the world as a response to my point that you just denied food to an entire civilian population because you claim Hamas is slow rolling dead remains. I'm not saying dead remains don't matter, but we're talking about real, alive babies, children, women who just went through this nightmare for 2 years, and you are denying denying the civilian population aid over a Hamas, something that maybe Hamas did, and you think you're the most moral army in the world?
Look, on this, Doran, let me ask you a question first. Doran, you can respond. Doran, you can respond. But let me just say something. Let me just say something. Doran, I would say this. What was noticeable in the Jared Kushner interview you're talking about with Witkoff as well, that they made it clear the tipping point for American intervention to rein in Israel was the completely senseless attack on Doha on the Hamas negotiators who were considering the latest plan to bring this to an end, which ended up killing no Hamas negotiators, which in itself I think would have been an appalling thing to do at that time when people were trying to bring peace, but actually ended up killing a bunch of people unconnected, including one of the Qatari security service people. And that was a tipping point because Donald Trump, I was there in Qatar earlier this year at the state dinner by the emir for Trump. They're very close, they go back a long way. America has its biggest army and military base in the Middle East is at Qatar. And to just go and brazenly attack Doha in the way that it did, I thought was an absolutely crazy thing for Israel to do. It showed that they were acting with complete impunity, didn't care about their number one ally, America, and the damage this might cause to the relationship with one of its biggest allies in the Middle East. And at that point, Trump went, enough.
They're essentially fair game, and it's on Hamas if they get killed. Israel really doesn't want to, but they're human shields, nothing else we could do. But then you look up and the entire thing is destroyed, and they're denying aid as a weapon of war, a clear example of collective punishment. Now, I'm sure my opponent here would disagree with it being characterized as a genocide, but what do you call that, Piers? You've decided an entire people are just fair game because they're human shields with no onus on you to demonstrate that there were Hamas weapons in every single one of these buildings that we destroyed or anything like that. And you can also just deny aid to a people who have just been decimated for 2 years as a punishment for what their government's done. And then you still have the nerve to call them terrorists and say they want the destruction of Israel. It's just too much for any reasonable person.
Today's show is sponsored by Oxford Natural, makers of the Optimum Day and Optimum Night all-natural supplements. Thousands of Brits and Americans are already taking them with incredible results. Optimum Day boosts your energy and supports weight loss throughout the day. Optimum Night helps you relax and get deep, refreshing sleep. They have countless success stories, including from some very familiar faces. England legend Michael Owen, who lost 40 pounds, AFTV's Robbie, who lost more than 100 pounds. To watch their full stories and many more, scan the QR code on your screen or visit oxfordnatural.com/Piers. And here's the best part. Use the code Piers and get 70% off your first order. Yes, 70% off with the code Piers. Well, I mean, yeah, look, I would say that in relation to Hamas, if you're an Israeli and you remember what happened on October the 7th because you lost people who died that day or were kidnapped or whatever it may be, the scale of what happened that day was on a different level to anything we've seen in a single day in the entire 75-year conflict between Israel and Palestine. And it displayed to me not just a terrorist view of indiscriminately killing anyone they could get their hands on, but a kind of nihilistic view, right? So I can understand actually why Israelis have a deep distrust of anyone related to running Hamas. I get that.
Yeah,
but I also think it's intellectually honest to say the scale of Israel's response has been massively disproportionate. The two things can be equally true.
I think that's right. And of course, who would think any Israeli would trust Hamas? But the other thing here, I was just reading earlier today, Haaretz had a piece about how essentially the Israeli government is very frustrated because there is no counter to Hamas that's rising, and there aren't as many protests as they think, there aren't as many rival gangs, and Hamas still has control of all this area. But Piers, I mean, just think about what the implication of that is. How many times have me and you been told over the last 2 years, by your guest right here in particular, that it is intolerable for Hamas to still be in power, and therefore we have to do whatever we can. And yet they've done all of this, killed tens of thousands of innocent people, destroyed the entire Gaza Strip, and Hamas is still in power. So even by their own logic, you failed on what the goal of this war was. And by the way, Piers, as you know, I've been sitting here, I'm sorry, it's a little frustrating. I've been sitting here for 2 years telling people, you're not gonna destroy Hamas this way. And every one of them said, what do you know, comedian? You're not an expert. And yet here we are at the end of the 2 years, then all the people, I'm not the only one, we're all totally vindicated. Hamas is still, he didn't even achieve the goal.
Yeah, I mean, Doran Spielman, we were told, look, once the hostages are all released, this is over. That clearly, at the moment, is hanging in the balance. I mean, I think it's obvious it wouldn't take a lot for this to flare up again. But what is indisputable, as Dave says, there's no sign that Hamas has lost all its power. I mean, they're operating with power in Gaza right now. They're still heavily armed. They have said publicly, we are not going to disarm. So, it seems to me that the original aim of releasing the hostages is one thing, but this idea that Israel has defeated Hamas is clearly not true. So where does that leave this ceasefire other than in a very precarious place? If Hamas just say, we are not disarming, what does Israel do?
First of all, Piers, I want to speak to some of the things that Dave just said. When it comes to the fog of war, Dave, I hear that you're saying anytime it's Hamas directly targeting Israeli soldiers, directly targeting civilians, it's the fog of war. You're saying that's the fog of war. But when it comes to Israel targeting Hamas, you still refuse to accept the basic principle. There was no Wannsee conference here. Israel's not committing genocide. There's no ethnic cleansing because they're Gazans. We have one goal, Dave. One simple goal: to destroy Hamas and bring home our hostages. And all of a sudden, it's not the fog of war, Dave. It is your fog. You're unwilling to understand the most basic principle here, that there's probably never been a more moral war fought by an army that does not want to go to war. What's the proof? It's exactly what you're saying. As soon as we got the hostages home, as soon as President Trump put a deal on the table, it's not a perfect deal. What was the very first thing we did? We withdrew exactly to the yellow border. We exactly gave time for Hamas to return the 20 living hostages and the 29 bodies. One second, Dave. One second. I let you speak.
Over dead
1 second, Dave. I did let you speak.
Most moral army.
Just give me
sorry. Go ahead.
One second, if you don't mind. We waited. They just killed 2 of our soldiers. There was no fog of war. These 2 boys were sitting outside a tank, walking around. They were shot by an RPG and killed in cold blood. When I listen to you, it doesn't sound like we're dealing with Hamas. It sounds like we're dealing with a bunch of kindergarten children that are out to play.
Again, Dave Smith destroys pro-Israel again. Listen to this discussion on Piers Morgan. You can tell there's one thing. And there's what I feel like is long to justify or classify everyone as a bad person. Because Dave Smith, remember, is a Jew who respects and value Palestinian rights. And there's one thing you noted from most pro-Israel people. They lack understanding and sympathy for Palestinians, because what we have seen from the media is constant dehumanization. And what we see here, Dave Smith do on Piers Morgan Uncensored is he highlights the issues that all the bias that we have seen so far. And if today we are talking about ceasefire, and I like that today, even Piers Morgan have come to understand that this bias, and he have come to agree that we need to also give the side of Palestinian a voice and listen and value their human rights, because human rights doesn't stop with the Jews only. Human rights doesn't stop with the whites only. Even the global south, the people are human beings who deserve equal human rights. And if you feel like the Jews should have human rights, also the Palestinians should have human rights. And this is a problem that you see across all media stations, where they dehumanize everyone who comes from Palestine, or dehumanize anyone who is proposing for rights of Palestinians. And this is a problem happening in this world. And when you say that Hamas broke all, let me not even use that term, because I know the media doesn't want to use this, because also even the algorithm would target those words. What I would say is that I have seen that we are bringing Palestine for the fact that we can say, from the information we are getting from Western media, that they broke the ceasefire. But the question is, we have seen IDF kill more than 81 people from Palestine. I don't understand what ceasefire means if killing 91 people from Palestine, and including some kids, can be termed as a withholding ceasefire deal. Because to me, I don't see how this adds up to this. And this is a problem we're having, where we have to assume that some people do not matter. And I've seen even the Western media highlight this issue of where Hamas allowed a few collaborators, around 28 collaborators and criminals, and shot them in public. My question is, even in the West, if you commit a treason, you are sentenced to death. The only difference is these are acting, the others put you in jail and waiting for you to die. There's no big difference, because we have seen when the police shoot recklessly in the Western countries, and we don't even complain about this. Also, when you want to tell us that you care about human rights or Palestinian human rights, why are you not even giving those Palestinians a right to express themselves? Why are you constantly dehumanizing them and only care about collaborators who are helping you to commit genocide according to the UN, according to ICJ, according to the Transparency International, and according to independent genocide scholars? You cannot keep complaining and trying to assume that everyone doesn't have logic, everyone doesn't have common sense. We can tell this is a genocide, as these bodies have said, the UN, ICJ, and the International Transparency and our Transparency International and independent scholars of genocide. This is not a new, but the problem is we have some people who think they do not follow our human rights, that they have special rights. And this ethnocentrism is what is bringing this problem. And one thing I will know is, unless we tackle this radicalism, unless we tackle this ethnocentrism among the Zionists, I will tell you that Middle East will never see peace. It's not an accidental, that is the fact. Because one, we are not tackling the root cause of the problem. This is not a religious problem, it's a large issue. And it's a problem of radicalization from both sides, and a lot of ethnocentrism from pro-Israel. Let us not ignore this. This is factual, and it must be addressed. And if this means that we must sit down, even if it's painful, let it be so. Let me know what you think about this. Do you agree that David Smith delivered on his points and managed to make sure that the pro-Israel understand him, and that they need to value the human rights for all the people, not only the Zionists only? Let's meet in the next video. I'm your host, James.